Welcome everybody to my podcast, Big Little Small Talk. I'm Megan O'Hara-Sullivan and I love to talk, but I also love to listen. If you're new here, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello listeners, you're with me, Megan O'Hara-Sullivan, and we're on Big Little Small Talk. Today I am interviewing Kimberley Halter. Now I went to the bonsai display during the Carnival of Flowers and I met Kimberley, and her joy and skill and enthusiasm for her bonsai was so infectious that I just knew that I had to have her on. So welcome along, Kimberley.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, well, you've been busy today. You've had a class. You've had some people here for bonsai classes.
Yes, that's right. So I teach bonsai. My business is the Bonsai Academy. So what I love is teaching people about bonsai. And so I had beginner class today, and they each made a bonsai tree and took it home, and they were so happy with it. So that made me happy.
That made you happy. Now, yes. I notice a little bit of an accent. Mm-hmm. You're from the United States, obviously. Tell me the story of how you came to Australia and be living in Toowoomba teaching bonsai.
Well, that's a very long story. So I was born in the middle of the United States in a very small town, halfway between St. Louis and Memphis. And I went to university and met an Australian. And she was very homesick for Australia, and she had Australian everything all through her room. The flag, the Vegemite. She made pavlova. She was just so homesick for Australia. And she said, I will get you a job in Australia and you can come for a working holiday. And I said, oh, great, fine, whatever. So I left and got a job. And 3 years later, she rang me and said, I have the perfect job for you in Toowoomba. It requires a lot of travel, and no Australian will have it because you are traveling so much. Your territory is between Toowoomba and Birdsville, and south to Stanthorpe and north to Taroom, and you will travel between all the small towns. And so I took this job with all this travel and was billeted with people and just had the best time. I absolutely loved it.
What type of work was it?
Well, it was the 80s. So it was for the Uniting Church and for education. So I have a degree in education. And so I would do after-school programs, I would do teacher support, I would teach volunteers how to teach in the classroom, I would do weekend youth camps, and I would do children's camps and after-school programs. Went out to Birdsville, and I took a giant earth ball, and I took a parachute, and I got the whole town involved in wide games. And so it was for community development. And
a few questions there. What's a giant earth ball?
Oh, a giant earth ball. Well, you are not old enough. Well, once upon a time you had, how can I describe it? So there was a giant ball as big as this room, and it had the earth on it, and you blew it up with an air compressor, and then you rolled it between people, and it was for playing really large games with, say, 100 people or something like that.
I thought it was a ball made out of earth.
No. It has a map of the earth on it.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. Yeah. So we're doing the community development work. So where you grew up in Missouri, was it a rural area?
It was a small town, and it was sort of like Toowoomba in that it had good medical facilities and education facilities, and the rural area came to it, but it was small, more like the size of Dalby. Yeah.
So you didn't get bumps thrown into the middle of Queensland, Australia, and just think, oh my God.
Everything was new, and everyone really took the mickey out because I was American, and they played lots of jokes and tricks, and yes.
and you loved it.
But I loved it. Yeah. I really loved it, yes.
Now let me guess the rest of the story. You met someone, fell in love, and stayed here.
I met someone, fell in love, and then I went back to the United States because I was on my way home. I had 3 weeks left. The job finished, and I had no other prospects, no other jobs. So the job finished, and I was on my way home, and I took scuba lessons. And I fell in love with my scuba instructor.
Ooh, are scuba instructors allowed to do that?
Oh, no. He was very proper. And he waited till after the course to ask me out, and he was a very proper young man. And so we had 3 weeks together, and then I went back to the U.S. And then he missed me and followed me to the U.S., and we got married over there. And we lived there 3 years. We had a very large scuba shop in Texas and traveled all over the Caribbean and took people scuba diving. And then my work asked me to come back and be a youth worker in Toowoomba. And that's how we came back. We came back to Toowoomba because I had a job.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk to you about the scuba shop a little bit later on, because that does feature in your story, I know. But tell me about your dad and his love of bonsai.
Yes. So my dad was in the Korean War, but was stationed in Japan. And so he never saw fighting, but he was in Japan and loved everything Japanese. And it was, not long after World War II. Japan was still a very poor country. And there he saw the bonsai trees. So when he came back to the U.S., it was many years later, but he remembered that, and he wanted to get into the bonsais. So he was in this little town. There's no one else around that did bonsai. He had no support. He had a book. That was about it. But he and I would go out to the bush, and we would find the traditional bonsai species. So we would dig up maples and pines and junipers, and he would make the bonsais.
So what were you digging up, though? Were you digging up plants?
Yeah, plants. Tiny little
right?
plants.
Okay.
Yes. So my family had acreage, so it wasn't a national park, or we weren't doing anything illegal.
That wasn't where I was going.
But yes, so he would find the little plants, and we would dig them up. And that's a really traditional Japanese way of finding bonsais, is to find the little tree in the wild. There's not that many places anymore that you can do that, but we did that when I was a teenager. And then he would bonsai them. So he had about 40 or 50 bonsai trees in the backyard. And I then came to Australia, was working here in Australia, and he called me one day and said, I need you to learn bonsai because I need you to take the trees to Australia. And I said, oh, that's going to be hard because of quarantine, and so I found out all about it. It was about $1,000 a tree. So he had 40 trees, so that was going to be more than like a house or a car. And anyway, I just knew that was out of our budget. But I did take a lesson or two, and I went back to Dad and said, all right, I'm ready to take your trees back to... He said, oh, no, you can't take my trees. You've only had one lesson. You don't know enough. So off you go, take more lessons. So I took more lessons, and then I went back to Dad. He said, nope, still don't know enough. But by then he was going blind. So he did his bonsais for 20 years blind. So he did them by feel. And it taught me a lot about bonsais and about that. And so every year then I would go back to Dad, and he would give me instructions. This needs to go over here. This branch needs to be cut off. This needs to be repotted. And I would do the bonsais with him while he was blind. So he did that. He turned blind when he was about 65, and he died when he was 84. So he did bonsai all that time while he was blind. And when he went to a nursing home, and we made a patio for him and shelving, and he took his bonsais with him to the nursing home.
That is the most phenomenal story. So do you think when he said to you, I want you to take my trees, did he know that he was going blind?
He knew he was going blind, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And tell me some more about him. Like, what did he do for a living?
Well, my dad was an artist, so we were in this tiny little town, and I asked him about that one time because he did everything. He did commercial photography, and he did like airbrushing in those days, where you take a photo and you make it more beautiful. He was quite famous for doing taking blueprints from architects, and then he would draw the building so that then you could take it to council or to a public school and raise the funds. So if someone were going to put up a new public school, the architect would bring the drawing to Dad, who would do a large picture that then would go up in a public space, and they could raise money for it. So he did that sort of thing, and he did portraits, and he did a little bit of everything. He did line drawings for newspapers. He just did all sorts of things. And I said to him, Dad, wouldn't you be better off in a bigger town, or, working for a newspaper where you just did, one thing? And he said, I would be bored. So I do everything, and start to finish, of all sorts of different projects, and it keeps me fresh and makes life interesting. So
he wasn't ever really a struggling artist. He was able to...
we struggled quite a bit. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. So my mother then, she worked at a department store. Would have been like Piggott's, probably, or Meyer, and she worked in the children's department and sold children's clothing, and then she worked her way up in that department store. So she would bring home the money every week in the paycheck, and we would have food and we'd have school clothes, and then Dad would bring in a big amount of money all at once, and you'd put a new roof on the house. It was that sort of thing.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
I read this quote, Kimberley, and it said, bonsai is not a race, nor is it a destination. It is a never-ending journey. Is that true?
That's true. Yes.
And I also read that bonsai literally translates to planted in a container.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So tell me, I've read that it has originated from a Japanese tradition, but then I've also read that it's Chinese. Where do you sit on that?
Well, I actually believe it's actually older than that. So the queen in Egypt, Hatshepsut, or something like that, I can't say it properly. Anyway, she had the beautiful, enormous temple, and in the front you can still see two enormous containers that are buried in the ground where she brought trees from Upper Egypt, Upper Nile. So it's ages and ages and ages that people have been planting trees in containers, thousands of years ago. And then the Indians from India took plants across to China, and the Buddhist nuns and priests, and they were medicinal herbs, and they would put them and transport them. Mm-hmm. So it's a very ancient tradition. But then Chinese, yes, they wanted to recreate a scene in the countryside, so using mountains and rocks to represent mountains and trees and that style, and then it went to Japan. So it's traveled from the Middle East right across to Japan, and then from Japan spread to the rest of the world. Yeah. So
tell me then, what defines a bonsai? What makes a bonsai a bonsai?
Yes. So you have a tree in a pot, and it's from any nursery or any garden center. But what makes it a bonsai is that there's an artistic design to it. So people want to be able to imagine a tree in the forest. So it's going to look a little bit more manicured than just a tree in the pot. And it's going to follow principles of artistic design. So there's a principle of 1/3. So if you have a painting, you'll have 1/3 and 2/3, for example, of a horizon line. The same sorts of principles of a 1/3 work for bonsai as well.
So explain that to me? Like 1/3 what? 1/3 tiny, 1/3 what?
Well,
shadow, or 1/3 what?
This might be hard on the radio. So if you look at this painting behind you, the mountain is 1/3.
Kimberley has walked away from the microphone because she's forgotten that we are on radio.
To look at a picture.
But how does the 1/3 work with bonsai?
And so with bonsai, oh look, I just happen to have a little picture here. So the first branch is 1/3, and the height of the tree then with the foliage is 2/3. So the trunk will be 1/3, and then the bonsai is planted 1/3 of the way along the pot, and there'll be a short side of the bonsai, and the 2/3 of the way in the pot will be the trunk line, will be 1/3 in the pot, and there'll be space in the pot for another 2/3.
Isn't that interesting? I did not know that. So when you see something that is in the ground, and as we came through your garden, I was asking you whether it's hard to resist bonsaiing everything, every tree that you've got, and so
Yes.
bonsai really literally has to be in some sort of container.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so also if you go to a Japanese garden, you'll see trees in the ground that have that same sort of principle, and they have been trimmed like a bonsai, but they're growing in the ground. And that's another art form, another Japanese art form for the Japanese gardens. Yes.
Okay, really. So you do read that bonsai is a symbol of peace, harmony, and balance.
Yes.
So explain that to me. Explain what are the principles. I know when I went to that day of yours that you had during the Carnival of Flowers, it was just so fascinating. All about you want something that looks like it's evenly balanced, but about the height and about the space in between, negative space. Explain all of the intricacies.
Well, that's a lot. But
I
anyway.
want to know them all.
So, in Japan, they really value age, which we don't necessarily here in the West. But in Japan and other Eastern cultures, they really like age and respect experience. So, bonsai trees usually have some sort of look of age to them. So the branches are pulled down, so they look. An older tree will have branches that go down and have the weight. They're a thicker branch, longer branch. They weigh, they come down. So the branches will come down, and there will oftentimes be something broken on a tree, or of something to make it look like it's been in a storm, and there'll be a dead branch on that tree and on a bonsai tree to make you think, oh, it's had a hard life, but it's overcome. And that's part of the look of the tree and the philosophy behind the bonsai. And then when you're working on, say, 1/3, 2/3 of the of the tree, 1/3 of it should be a little bit empty. There should be some space, and that's about a negative space, and being able to look at a tree and say, all right, it's had a hard life, it's overcome. There's a story behind that tree. What's that story? And maybe it's been in a storm, or maybe it's had a good life just out by itself in a paddock, or maybe it's had to fight for life in a forest. So yes, you're always trying to tell a story with that tree.
So the one that you had at the show was one that was really leaning over, like those trees at 1770 where they've just been completely exposed to the wind and the ocean.
Yes, exactly.
I thought that you said that you want them to look as though they couldn't fall over. How does that then work? That you're one?
Not that they're not going to fall over, but that they have fallen over and overcome. So this is the picture of the tree in real life on top of the mountain. See, there's a person there. So that tree the wind has taken this tree, and this tree has been, what do you call it when they check the age? Anyway, it's been tested for the age. So this tree is it's in the mountains, it's 1,000 years old. It's been blown by the wind. It has a lot of dead wood on it, but it's still alive. It's still, it has survived.
It's almost touching the ground,
but it's
almost running parallel to
that's
the ground.
right. It's blown over. It's nearly touching the ground. Very wind blown, and that was the look I was trying to recapture. But my tree that I have, I don't have a tree that's 1,000 years old. I've still got, I'm waiting. So I've got to use a young tree, but get that same sort of feel that it's been blown horizontal by the wind. It's been on top of a mountain, but it's had a hard life, but it's overcome. Yeah.
I'll just remind the listeners that you're with me, Megan O'Hara Sullivan, and we're on Big Little Small Talk, and we're talking to the secretary of the Toowoomba Bonsai Club, Kimberley Halter, who is taking us through the intricacies and fascinating stories around bonsai. So, Kimberley, tell me about the displaying of the bonsai, you talked about how you have this other complementary or accent plant.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yes. So when you display the bonsais, in Japan particularly, they're trying to show the tree in the very, very best light. So you want to have a very plain background, so there's nothing distracting there. And then you'll put the tree onto a little table.
Does it always have to be a table?
It doesn't always have to be a table. Sometimes it could be like a tatami mat or something like that. But it's about saying this tree is really special and it's going to go on a table or a mat, or it's in its own little space of some sort. Yes. And then usually 9 times out of 10 there's a little companion plant that goes with that, and so that plant in general would tell another similar complementary story. So if it's like with the club show that's with the Carnival of Flowers, that's spring, so you're going to have a little spring violet or something that says springtime that goes along with that tree. Or if it's a tree from the mountains and it's very dry, you might have succulents in a little pot next to it. And then if it's autumn, you might have autumn crocus. Or you might have something, a fern that turns red or brown or something. So you have a complementary little plant next to the bonsai that helps, sort of fills out that story.
Tell the story. And what else goes with the display? Is it just the what you've got it placed on, what it's behind it, and the complementary, the accent plant? Is there any other parts of the...
And in Japan, not always here in Australia, but in Japan there will be a scroll. And that scroll, again, will be complementary to the season. So...
And where does the scroll go?
The scroll is on the wall behind the tree. Yes, so you don't see that very often here because we don't have we don't always have scrolls. But if you're a very serious bonsai person, you will go to Japan and you will buy a whole series of scrolls so that you have many different ones to show.
It was a bit like buying clothes or something. When you're going to display something, you will take all of those elements and
Correct.
You will mix them up sometimes.
Yes,
and,
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So just like if you have an outfit and you've got shoes and a handbag and a bit of jewelry that goes with it, you'll have the same with your tree. You'll have the stand, you'll have a companion plant, you'll have a scroll, and maybe, that might change up depending on the time of the year. Just like if you have a handbag, you might have pink for summer and you might have black for winter. Same sort of thing with the bonsais, if you're very conscientious about these things.
Indulgent, which I am not, because you've always left something in the other bag. So what about is it a jitter? Jitters? What are they? Jitas. Is that just the name for the complement? I thought it was a piece of wood or something that you would have.
Oh, yes. So even... so even the companion plant has a piece of wood that sits on it. So it sits on a stand as well, a little piece of wood, yes.
Oh,
yes.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, that is amazing. So tell me about...
You've done your research.
Well, I do find it really fascinating because it's so steeped in sort of... mystery and
tradition.
Symbolism
and tradition. Yes.
And when you showed me it was almost like a bookcase, and you have different things displayed. What are they called?
Yes. So if you have small trees, they'll get lost amongst the big trees. So the bonsais come in different sizes. You can have them as small as a thimble, the pot as small as a thimble, or you can have the next sizes 5 centimeters, 8 centimeters, 12, so they come in different sizes, right up to maybe a meter and a half, 2 meters.
That's the size of the pot, is it?
Is the size of the tree, the height of the tree, yes. So it might take 2 people to carry that bonsai. Or 3 or whatever. So if you're displaying the small trees, they'll get lost amongst all of those bigger trees. So you have a stand that holds maybe 5 or 7 of the small trees. And, yeah.
And tell me about the placement. Like you'll have different ones that have to tell a story.
Yes, they have to tell a story. So generally at the top, you've really done your research. So generally at the top, there'll be a tree from the mountains. So it might be a juniper or a pine. And then in the middle, there'll be a tree that might be in the middle of the forest, like a maple or an elm. And then at the bottom, there'll be something maybe that is grows lower, like a swamp cypress or something like that. So you are trying to recreate nature, even though it's 5 trees in a pot on a stand. Yeah.
And will they be all different people's ones that they've brought, or does someone do a whole story?
Well, yes, usually that can be either way. So what I do is, because I teach and I want my students to exhibit, I will sometimes say, let's get 5 people to each bring a small tree, and we'll do an exhibit together. And that's what we did for the Toowoomba show, to encourage my students to put trees in. But if sometimes people will specialize in all those small trees, so they will have enough to fill the whole display.
Has that got a special name, that display?
Yes, so that size is shohin. Shohin. So it's a shohin display.
Kimberley, have you ever been to Japan to see bonsai?
I have. Oh, don't get me started on that. Yes, so I went this February to a big show called Kokufu. And that show in February, I went with my teacher, and he studied in Japan, but he lives in the U.S. now. So I met him in Japan with 3 of his other students, and we went to the Kokufu show, which is over 4 days. And there's 200 trees that are absolutely perfect. I mean, it's amazing. They're perfect. And then 5 have won prizes. So it was really important to go with my teacher to be able to say, why did these 5 win? Because how would you choose? And he was able to say, this one won because of this one won because of that. And because he knew the people that were displaying, we would walk, and they would often tell us some of the secrets behind how the trees were developed. So it was really wonderful, really wonderful experience. Yeah.
And do most people who are into bonsai, do they kind of live and breathe the philosophy that goes with it? You know, the sort of Zen philosophy, or not really so much?
Some do, some don't. Yes.
It's not so much the Japanese culture or the...
Some people really get into the Japanese culture, yes. And they'll do ikebana, which is the flower display as well. They'll do a symbolic sword, some people do martial arts as well. So, some people really get into the whole Japanese culture of things. And other people have some trees in a pot, and they're in the backyard, and they're pretty happy with that.
Yeah. And I know I'm asking the intricacies of it, but it truly is so fascinating. Moss is hard to get, I hear.
Yes, it's very, and normally I am the queen of moss, and people come to me specially, and it is just so dry. So it really is difficult to find the moss at the moment. Yes. So you put moss on your trees, and it helps to keep them cool, and it helps them to look, Japanesey, and especially for the displays, you do that.
Is the moss replicating grass, or not really?
Yes, but in Japan they have moss gardens.
Right, moss gardens. Wow.
Yes, like the whole.
And is that for buying? Do you mean that's a garden?
Yeah, so instead of grass, they have moss.
It's not like a lawn farm where you go and get turf.
So there might be, at a temple particularly, it's all moss under the trees. And there are people, and that's their job, is to just pick all of the weeds out of the moss, and they sit with little baskets and tweezers.
Tweezers?
And pick the weeds out of the moss, and it's just so it's moss as far as you can see instead of grass.
Where would you make your own moss here? Do you? Where do you make moss actually?
I don't make moss, but I grow moss.
Okay.
Yes. So if you're going to display a tree, oftentimes you'll put moss all the way across, all the whole base of the tree. So I collect moss, and I find that if I get moss in the near surrounds, that it will grow better at my house. So, like, I went to Mount Tambourine one time, and there was in the rainforest, and there was this thick moss, and I thought, oh man, that is beautiful. I'm taking that home. And when I did, it didn't do very well because it wasn't the right conditions. Yeah,
Not the right moss.
it's not the right moss. That's right. There's thousands of different types of moss.
Is it?
So there's a creek. I shouldn't tell all my secrets, but
No.
there's a creek nearby that has moss that grows on rocks. And I go to that creek, but it's dry at the moment.
And what about the little stones that you have at the base? How do you choose the colour and the shape and the texture and all of that of the stone?
Yes, so that's its own little world. So the stones you'll have stones that are like decorations in some ways as far as the tree goes, and those stones once again need to help to tell the story of the tree. So it might be very rough and be like a mountain in the background, or it might be smooth if you're trying to recreate that the tree's growing along a creek bank. So you make them match.
Yeah. When you go to bonsai, like that place, the one you went to in Japan,
Yes.
do they have all products there as well?
Yes, they have a big sales area. It's a whole building, 3 stories. And yes, you can buy rocks and stands and trees. We can't, of course, bring the trees back. And tools and
Which takes me back to, did you ever bring any of your dad's trees out?
Never.
You didn't?
In the end, I didn't get it. It was too hard with the, well, for one thing, he was in a nursing home, and gradually the trees did die. And then secondly, it was too hard with the quarantine because they have to be bare rooted, and I was just worried they wouldn't live, so I didn't bring any of his. But I did, get the whole love of bonsai, and he made me what I am.
Yeah. So, I mean, what a lovely thing, the thought of you when you're working away on your trees. And how many trees would you have here?
Oh, no, you don't count.
Don't want to know. Okay. You don't want to know. So,
in the display area, I have 60 trees. And then I have a growing area in the back and a propagating area.
And your husband's obviously very much on board because he builds some of the displays.
Yes, and he builds stands, and he does watering systems, and he carries things for me, and he builds my sheds, and he is marvelous.
Has he ever got into it himself?
No.
No. Because I wanted to ask you about the wiring. And I did read someone said, is bonsai cruel? Is it cruel? I suppose trees aren't sentient beings, are they?
Oh, yes, they are.
Oh, beg your pardon. Oh, where have I gone wrong here, listeners?
Well, I don't think it's cruel, or I wouldn't do it. So when you have an apple tree and it's in an orchard, you are going to stake that apple tree so that it's straight, and it's going to grow up. And then you'll trim that apple tree so that it can be harvested. So you'll have the limbs coming out, and it's going to give you the most fruit that it will. And someone in the orchard loves that apple tree, prunes that apple tree, harvests the apples, fertilizes. And you wouldn't say that was cruel. That's been done for thousands of years. So with the bonsais, instead of wanting them straight, we want them curvy, bendy. It's more interesting to have movement in the trunks. So when they're little, we put wires on them, and then you can shape them. And because of that, you have wires on, and then before the wires can damage the tree, you take them off. Well, that's the idea. Sometimes the tree gets away on you, but in general, you put the wires on, you take it off. You put the wires on, take it off. And even if the tree is 400 years old, it will still have wires on the new branches and the fresh growth to put it exactly where you want it.
I must admit, when I had the image of going to a bonsai class, I thought, well, that's not going to last very long because you're just in there snipping off one leaf here, one leaf there, and that's it. But it's not that at all, is it?
No.
It's so much. So when people are coming to class, are you talking about the things that you've talked about today, about form and composition and...
Yes, but probably not in that much detail. So you've done your research. So what I do is I talk about the different styles of bonsai, and I say, now if you're walking through the forest, you're going to see some tall, straight trees. You're going to see trees slanting in the wind. You're going to see a tree that's fallen over, and more little trees then have grown up, as the branches. You'll see a tree by a creek that the creek's taken all the dirt away from its roots, and it'll have exposed roots. So what you see in the forest is what we're trying to recreate in a tree, in a pot. And so I talk about that, and then we talk about how to look after and care for the trees, and we talk about then some of the artistic things, like we want a triangle shape, we want the rule of thirds, and then so that takes, I do that pretty quickly because people glaze over.
How dare they?
And then we get into it, and we make a tree. So I take a juniper, and we take it's probably, that's 30 centimeters, 40 centimeters, pretty good sized tree, and we trim it up and shape it, and wire it, and repot it.
And by the time they come back next week, has very much happened, or is it a bit like watching paint dry? Dare I say it?
Not so much, but yes. So they walk away in one day with the tree. They walk away with their bonsai, and it's worth about $200 the tree if they were to buy it when they walk out of my class.
Yeah. Okay.
And then so then I invite them to bring that same tree back in about 6 months, and it'll be should be bushy, and then we can trim it up and we can put it in. And reshape it
and
if we need to.
And are you saying do not touch this tree in between now and when you come back? Don't freewheel it with the bonsai?
No, if they freewheel, that works for me. It's all good. And I hope they don't kill the tree. And that's one of the reasons I do lessons rather than just sell the tree. I want people to know how to look after it, and I want them to be able to have it to live. So it's not necessarily freewheeling, but it is... But if they read the books and read the materials and have a little experiment and a little bit of a play and be successful or not, well,
what's the most common thing? Do they overlove it and overwater it?
The soil is designed to drain, so it's really difficult to overwater. But if you don't water, then you're in trouble. So you need to water it every day.
Okay, Kimberley, true or false to these questions? In China and Japan, there are bonsai that are more than 1,000 years old.
True.
Oh.
And in Japan, it's the one that's 1,000 years old is owned by the emperor, and there is history. So first it's written on like bamboo wooden slats, and then it's on parchment, and then it's on, and now it's on computer. But yeah, every time it was repotted, every person who worked on it, there's 1,000 years. It comes with history.
Tell me about that. Like, is there, a bit like you and your father, but in Japan, say, are there people who that craft is handed down?
Yes.
That they're the bonsai crafts people?
Yes, yes. And so they will have generations, 4 generations, 5 generations of people that have had bonsai nurseries and have looked after trees. Yes.
Right, bonsai nurseries. Okay, another true or false question. The most expensive bonsai sold for over $1.3 million.
That's true.
That's
not sure if that's still the highest going rate, but yes. So over $1 million for a tree is common.
Common. Gosh. All right.
For a tree made by a master. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A bit like a master artist or something.
That's right.
Now, you did mention earlier about how you met your husband doing a scuba diving course. Now, you actually had a scuba diving shop in Toowoomba.
Yes.
Quite incredibly for something that's at the top of a mountain. How did that happen?
So, well, my husband was a scuba instructor when we met, and he was offered a job running a dive shop in Tahiti, and he turned it down to come to Texas and marry me.
No.
Poor little thing. So we had a dive shop in Texas, and then when I was asked to return to Toowoomba, he bought into a very small shop, and then it gradually got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So then I was left the youth work, social work job I was doing and went into the dive shop with him. And the two of us ran the dive shop, and it was very successful.
So you were selling dive gear rather than taking diving
No,
classes?
we sold dive gear. We took people on trips. So I did 4 international trips a year with diving to Vanuatu, Solomons, PNG. We went to Egypt. We went to California. We went to the Mediterranean. We traveled with groups.
I need to expand my horizons, because I'm thinking you're going swimming at Crestbrook Dam.
No, nothing local, because you can't swim in the dams because they are drinking water. So we couldn't teach scuba in the dams. We had to be in the pools, and then we had to go down to the coast. So we went to the coast every weekend. We piled people in the car or the van. We had all the scuba gear. We started early in the morning, and we went down and dived. And because we were in Toowoomba, we never did the same dive site 2 weekends in a row. So we would go to Coolangatta and dive the Tweed River, or we would go to Bundaberg the next weekend. And then we would go out of Moreton Island, Moreton Bay somewhere on a boat, and then we would go to the Sunshine Coast. So we had a really big variety of dive sites, and it was a dive adventure business, yes.
And eventually with the dive shop, you turned it into your own TAFE, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Well, so I was asked by New South Wales, actually, to develop a apprenticeship for dive instructors. And so at that time there was no training package for scuba or for outdoor recreation, and they were just developing that. So like there's a training package for hairdressers that says this is the standard for hairdressers, or for a carpenter or the plumbers. There's a training package for outdoor recreation. And if you're going to take people on a overnight camping, or if you're going to take them scuba diving, there's a certificate, 2, 3, 4, and diploma for that. So that wasn't written at that time. So I was asked to write the training package for scuba diving, and that's what I did. I wrote a certificate 2, a certificate 3, a certificate 4, diploma, an advanced diploma, and specialty courses as a training, as the government issued training package. And then I took it to the TAFE colleges, and I said, now this is now a certificate course, and the TAFE, as a TAFE college, you should be offering this and teaching this. And the TAFE colleges said, no, it's too difficult. It's too much insurance, too much equipment, too hard, too few students, too expensive. And I went right around. I thought, Sydney, the Cairns, Western Australia, no one would take it on. And so I said, well, I'll just turn the dive shop into a registered training organization. How hard can it be? And I'll teach the outdoor recreation package.
What did your husband think about taking the shop and turning it into your own TAFE?
Well, he was a little bit like,
okay, sweetie.
yeah, go for it. I mean, you think you can do that? And I didn't think it'd be that hard. It was really hard to manage all the government requirements. So yes, it was very hard. And so I did that, and that was 2001 that we did that. So I was already teaching scuba instructors. At that time, I was the national examiner for all of Australia and the South Pacific for scuba instructors, and I was teaching people to be scuba instructors. And so I was teaching plumbers and electricians and policemen how to be scuba instructors. Oh. And so since that was similar to the training and assessment and the how to teach, then I also took that on. And that then really expanded because I was teaching the trainer and assessor course and teaching plumbers how to do plumbing and truck drivers how to teach people to drive trucks or fix trucks or whatever, just the general public. And I thought, this is a piece of cake, because we're talking life and death with scuba diving. If an instructor does not teach scuba correctly, that person dies. So the responsibility as the national assessor for scuba instructors was so strong that you had to be exactly right down the line. And if you didn't do that properly, then people died. So then to turn around and say, well, I'm going to teach now someone how to teach
hairdressers how to cut
hair. If you get a bad haircut, it's not good, but nobody dies usually. So yeah, so I found it was good. So I did a lot of interesting things then with the registered training organization. One of the things I got involved with was teaching sheep shearers how to teach sheep shearing. And I worked in the West, which was kind of a nice little circle, because I'd started off in the West and I went out to Bollin and Gundawindi and Charleville and Cunnamulla and Dubbo and around the ridges, and I did how to teach so that they could run shearing schools. But the shearing schools were under the auspices of the University of Queensland at Gatton, the Ag College at Gatton. So that meant that the sheep shearers had to become university professors, didn't they? So not only was I teaching how to teach, but I was also teaching computer skills, how to send emails, how to write professional letters. So yeah.
Isn't that incredible that you've kind of gone full circle? And I'm sure there's a whole other show within that. But unfortunately, like always, I seem to be running out of time. So I wanted to ask you, what has bonsai taught you?
Oh, it's taught me lots. It's taught me patience. It's taught me, it's given me an international perspective to look at trees and think about, a Chinese or a Japanese perspective. I've traveled to China and traveled to Japan to see the bonsai and to the mountains of America and wild places to see wild trees. So that's been really great. I've made a lot of friends, and it's been a wonderful hobby in that there's always more to learn. It's like I never feel like I've learned it all.
And I can imagine that sense of serenity too.
Oh, yes.
Or is it deep frustration?
No. Well, it can be, I suppose, frustration. But generally, you kind of working on a tree and you get in a zone, especially if you're wiring or trimming, and you're present, 100% present in that tree. There's a great sense of flow, that I am in this space, that I want to be in this space, that there's nothing to interrupt me, that I am just here with this tree and I'm 100% present in what I'm doing. And that's a beautiful place to be. Oh,
I love that answer. And from that very intelligent, thoughtful answer, I'm going to something quite trivial. Kimberley, as an American, I wouldn't imagine, yes. Well, apart from the Kennedys, you don't have any royalty there. But who is your most favourite royal person?
Well, I admire Queen Mary from Tasmania. She came from Tasmania. She's in the Danish royal family. Very beautiful, even after having many children. And she had to change countries. She had to learn a new way of life. She had to learn a totally new job, which the royalty is just 100%. You have to give yourself to it. And she chose to do that. And I imagine there would have been sacrifices there, but you never hear about that. It's just she's just a beautiful, calm person that's chosen a wonderful life. So
sounds a bit like Queen Kimberley, I would say, here in Australia, all the way from Missouri. All right, well, what about the song that can't keep you off the dance floor?
It's Elvis Presley's All Shook Up, but with Susie Quattro's version. Yeah. So my husband and I, we do 50s rock and roll and 40s swing, and we travel around the world. We belong to a couple dance clubs around the world in England and U.S., and we dance. And so Susie Quattro's version of All Shook Up by Elvis Presley just makes me dance. Yeah,
I would love to see a YouTube video of you and your husband. Now, look, that is definitely another show. That's a part of your life I haven't even touched on. But look, it's just been such a joy meeting you today. Well, not meeting you, hearing your story and hearing the history. So much. Yeah, so thank you for being my guest on Big Little Small Talk.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it, and I appreciate your thoughtful questions and your research. Has been very nice. Thank you.
Thank you. That's it for this week. Thanks for joining me on Big Little Small Talk. I hope you can make the time to join me next week. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favourite podcast app.